I'll call to order the budget meeting of the Wilmington City Council. And at this time, I will turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Caudle. Oops, first I need to take a roll call, and I also need to mention that the mayor is on his way and apparently will be here shortly. Mr. Rivenbark, are you present? Mr. Anderson? Here. Mr. Barnett? Mr. Spears?
Here.
And Mr. Waddell? Here. And I am also present. So, once again, at this time, I will turn it over to our city manager, Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Good morning, Council. Appreciate you taking some time out of a gloomy day on a holiday weekend to go over this budget. We know that there are there's a lot of interest in the budget and a lot of discussion that probably needs to take place. We do not have an agenda for this morning. We do have, first of all, we're going to have Ms. Mortel do a quick update on some accounting measures that are essentially accounting measures that have to be placed in the proposed budget. I'll have her review those, and then we'll turn it over to you for discussion.
Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. These are the adjustments that we're going to talk about. We have HUD entitlement. As we told you, the federal government releases this information sometimes after the adopted budget, sometimes before. We have that information, so we'd like to get it into the budget. We have a parking debt service. It was just an administrative error that I'll tell you about. And then we have an FTE count that may change. So this is the most complicated one. We have two funds that receive federal funding, HOME and CDBG. They have an allocation that is allowable to go to the admin fund. If and when these change, we have to change 4 funds. So this is the puzzle that I'll walk you through. FY24, we actually got a decrease of about $160,000. That $160,000 is about 9% of our total budget from the federal government. We drilled down and asked them why. The money that we get is formula driven. It's based on population, poverty, people in crowded homes, and other items. And what we got back was that even though our population went up, the number of people living in poverty went down by 12%, and the people living in overcrowded houses decreased by 21%. I would not leap to the conclusion that that means that everything we've done has done that. You have to dig into the data and make sure that people aren't coming here with higher salaries that are changing that number. So we would have to dig into that a little further. So as I stated, there's allowable amount. So CDBG allows up to 40%, and HOME allows up to 10%. So of that $160,000, we're losing about $40,000, $41,000. So here's the transfer to them, and then this is where it goes. So now we have to find $40,000 to be able to make CBDG admin, or people who administer the program, whole. And now that the general fund is 1 cent, it's a little bit easier. So we swapped it from the gap financing to the transfer to CBDG. So it will go over and make that transfer whole, the fund holes, at $867,000. Are there any questions about this?
When you said you're going to dig into it, if we dig into it and we find that the federal government's numbers are wrong, will our numbers increase, or will our money increase?
It's their data, so we'd actually have to ask for their data to dig into and understand where they got the data. I was just trying to make a point that we don't want to leap to that conclusion until that's either done or they tell us what actually happened.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
The next one is really just a parking and label error. It's coming to you because it's going to change the ordinance. So the ordinance had debt service as $2.4 million. In actuality, it should have been 2.8. So we shifted $384,000 So it's labeled correctly in the ordinance. The entire fund stays the same at 8.5 million. And we have an FTE authorization adjustment, which is pending June 6th. So the recommended budget has 1,161. That is also a rounded number. And I broke out special purpose because that's the one that's going to be impacted. On June 6th, and that coming before you for consideration will be the Healthy Homes Grant. Within the Healthy Homes Grant is 3 positions. So after your discussion about healthy homes, this may impact the next year's budget. So we're going to put it in there pending your decision. And if something happens, we will make an amendment to that on June 6th or for the second reading. And that will bring it to 1,164 total FTE count. So what the budget will change, the total budget at 351.1 million will change to 351 essentially, and that's the 159,000 from HUD. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Laura. Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we'll now turn it over to council and have council ask questions or pose proposals to recommend for the manager's change in the proposed budget.
Questions, comments? Mr. Waddell?
Yeah, I've got a list, but just that Healthy Homes Grant, so we're going to be having some discussion in the June meeting
Yes,
about
sir.
that.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to get ahead of it, so that'll be a one-time grant, or is it a recurring grant opportunity if we're adding 6 FTE position, or FTE?
Suzanne, are you in the audience?
Yes, sir. The Healthy Homes Grant, an ordinance will come to you June 6th to appropriate $1.5 million, which is the Healthy Homes Grant from HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Programs in Healthy Homes. It's a three and a half year program that will fund 3 full-time positions and grants of up to $10,000 to make health and safety repairs in homeowner and rental homes for folks who are at or below 80% area median income.
And then
And-
at the end of that 3.5 years, I mean, is there anticipation that program continues? I mean, or would we have potentially 3 positions that we had created that would be then just having to be funded by the general fund?
We will apply for continued funding. There's certainly, it's competitive, there's no guarantee. When folks are hired with grant funds, they're made aware of that, and so then it would be a decision of council at that time what to do with those positions, and if the program would continue.
Let me also state that we would keep the metrics on those on that program for 3.5 years, and then bring those metrics back to evaluate whether or not it would be worthwhile to fund it with local dollars or discontinue if there was not a federal grant available.
Okay. But we'll potentially we're going to take action on that June 6th. We're not taking that it's going to be, it may go in the budget if we adopt it in June. So, okay.
Yes, sir. And I'll just add, just for context, we are wrapping up a 3-year, we're wrapping up a little early, but a previous grant of $1.8 million for a lead hazard reduction program. So
Saw that.
this program builds on that. This grant does. So we feel that if we perform, that we can make a good case for continued funding, given
Sure.
the federal program continues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Suzanne.
Suzanne, we have been awarded that grant, right?
Yes, sir, we have, it has been awarded.
We're going to dig into this in the June meeting more. Is that, I mean, I guess my question was, and you can say, let's just talk about it later, which is perfect with me, because then I'll be read up on it a little more, but when we're looking at it for a vote. But like the grants, I presume this is trying to keep affordable housing in the community is kind of the goal, correct?
Yes, the purpose of it is to address health and safety issues,
But by doing so,
to keep the housing
it
stock.
keeps the housing stock in decent shape, right?
Yes, sir.
So the rental side of that is, I guess there's some guardrails that, I mean, you give them the 10 grand, they upgrade the house, and then out goes the tenant. I mean,
No.
you follow my,
I follow your thinking. They will, in order for a property owner to receive the funds if they are own a rental property, they would have to agree to keep the property as affordable rental for 3 years.
and y'all have to kind of track that, or is that
We do have to monitor that.
y'all must have some trackers. A lot of more of that. It seems like a lot of things we're doing, y'all are getting more on your plate in that regard.
I
Thank
wouldn't
you.
disagree with that, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Other questions or issues?
Yeah. So I mean, we're just
Yes,
just
sir.
freestyling up here.
Yes,
That's
sir,
what's happening?
we're freestyling. it.
Okay. Well, this housing and neighborhoods, this new department, Housing and Neighborhood Services that's being proposed, did I miss some sort of discussion on that?
No, sir.
Okay, so it's just on page 91 of the budget, and we're no presentation on what it is or why. I mean, the whole description to me is a little bit nebulous, and I don't really understand what we're doing with it, why. I mean, I know we looks like we're throwing some good hot button issues and buzzwords all into one new department, but I mean, realistically, I don't understand what we're doing other than just adding a department and some staff. So, I mean, I think some discussion is warranted if anytime we're adding a new department to the city government.
Certainly. I'll be glad to give you some context for it. When I came here 15 years ago, housing was, as it is now, in the Community Services Department along with Code Enforcement and Recreation. And I asked Mr. Cheatham at the time, I said, why in the world do you have recreation thrown in with housing? That makes no sense. And his comment to me was, go be the interim director for a while and you'll see why it works that way. And so I became the interim director within a month of after coming here and understood the connection that existed between community service and within community services. Since that time, there has been a change. There have been two changes. One, there is a greater emphasis on recreation in this community, and that is evidenced by the number of facilities that have been built and the number of attractions that bring folks to our community as a result of those. The recreation analysis that was recently completed was one of the things that recommended pulling the recreation department out. There have been several folks all along the way for the 15 years who have said, why in the world don't you pull recreation out? And essentially that's what we're doing here. We're pulling recreation out and letting it be a standalone department. We're bringing code enforcement from public services into the newly formed department. The newly formed department also allows us to concentrate more on things that are, for lack of a better term, have become more important in the scheme of things. As you know, there have been a number of issues that have come before council that have been neighborhood related. And although it's really not neighborhood related, the homelessness issue is one of those. There are some 40 some odd neighborhoods in this community. And as I am telling all of the employees when I roll out the values to these groups, it used to be smooth peanut butter for everybody. You take smooth peanut butter and you lay it evenly across the bread. With those 40 some odd neighborhoods, they all expect different levels of service. and we don't always provide a good differentiation on level of service. So the purpose is to bring out the code enforcement and combine it with housing and have a department that actually is hopefully more responsive to council's concerns, to community concerns regarding homelessness, housing, community issues, and hopefully to be able to be more responsive to those issues and even proactive with regard to them. That, in essence, is a summary of it. I'll be glad to answer any further questions that you may have.
Whoever fills that position and runs that department is in for a tough job. I mean,
Yes,
that's
sir.
all encompassing, basically every difficult issue we deal with at the city into one department.
Yes, sir, and I would argue that it at least gives us the opportunity to put somebody in the position to hold them accountable. Right now, the department head is not only responsible for all of those, but she's also responsible for recreation at the same time, both of which are very robust and growing areas.
I appreciate the explanation.
You're welcome.
Charlie? I'm always questioning when we develop new departments.
Yes, sir.
Governments grow,
Yes, sir.
but is this just the executive director position?
Yes, sir. We'll be bringing the code enforcement officials in from Public Services into the Code Enforcement Division that'll be in there, and then it'll be combined with the housing, and that person will be, as Councilman Waddell mentioned, responsible and busy for some of the most important things that are coming before our council right now.
Well, let me ask this. I even feel like this is a stupid question. What is the end, I mean, what is the goal at the top of the hill that we're not doing now? I mean, I understand parks and recreation being separated, I get that. But creating this, what is the, I mean, do you think it's just, tell me your opinion.
I think it creates a point person that has on their plate the responsibility for addressing neighborhood issues. Right now, if neighborhood issues come up, they do not get the attention they deserve as a result of the fact that we don't have someone on point. They generally fall to either the department head or to the deputy city manager who's over that area. I would also say that although that we are able to do it on a catch-as-catch-can basis with the DCM overseeing it and being the backstop, I don't think we're able to be strategic and necessarily effective, anything but reactive with regard to neighborhood issues when they come forward.
So give me an example of a neighborhood issue that we're talking about.
Well, right now we're talking mainly about housing that goes on in different neighborhoods. There are numerous affordable housing initiatives in the community that come forward. Our current CDBG staff, current housing staff, do not necessarily have the capacity to do that. For example, the tiny homes question comes forward.
The what?
The tiny homes question comes forward, and we find ourselves with the DCM having to respond to that issue. And there are other affordable housing initiatives within the city that probably fall outside of the existing housing staff's ability to handle.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Neil.
So to tag on to that, is it primarily NIMBY stuff? I mean, it sounds like we're setting somebody up just to field all those calls.
No, sir, I would disagree that it's just NIMBY stuff. I think it's NIMBY.
Well, I mean, is that a big piece of it?
I think it's NIMBY stuff now because we're being reactionary. I don't think we're being strategic. I don't think we're looking down the road at trying to address some of these issues. For example, we've got the Greater Downtown Plan that's coming forward as we speak. It's coming forward, which is designed to look at the neighborhoods in the downtown area, put forward some strategic objectives, and try to make sure that those are attained. That will cross out of the planning division and into implementation at some point in time. And that will have to be overseen by somebody. So I would argue that it's not just NIMBYism. We've got to look down the road at what we can do to be strategic is probably not the best word, but something other than reactive with regard to what neighborhoods want and be able to try to provide that. I do believe that local government has become a neighborhood-oriented business nowadays. And I think it's important that we have someone who's looking at it on a more comprehensive basis to be able to differentiate between neighborhoods as to what's needed and what's not.
So how would, what's the interaction or overlap, or what's the relationship with zoning? Somebody might call Catherine for this question versus call this person's department for that question.
I think the zoning is a regulatory function. I think the housing, as I envision it, is one in which we are able to plan for more services other than just the regulation. For example, we may have street and sidewalk issues in one neighborhood but not in another, where we may have development issues or lack of development issues in one neighborhood but not another. So I see this as a crossover between planning and, for lack of a better term, economic development, but economic development doesn't get into neighborhoods as much as this position would.
Okay.
So I'm making up examples on the fly, so sorry for the stuttering, but
Sure.
For example, say we're trying to work with developers to come up with ways to do things more affordably. Who would that fall under, this, or is that more of a planning and zoning?
Depends on the developer you talk to. I don't mean to be smart with you, but
We're trying to craft policy that.
I think that's a planning function. I see this more as one, for example, and I use this example in my values presentation, and it's not necessarily a great one, but we had a situation down on Summer Rest Road where Duke Power went in and put in streetlights. The neighborhood raised Cain about it. We went in and took the streetlights out because we figured out that nobody down there wanted them. That was a very reactive measure. I can see this position, or I see this position as being more strategic and looking at dividing the community up into neighborhoods, determining what service levels do and do not need to be provided, and trying to be proactive in getting to those.
Again, we're picking on a random example, but I mean, did Duke Power reach out to the city and say, hey, we're going to do this?
No, sir.
So what if somebody's just got a trouble, they're just kind of grumpy about their, they don't think their landlord's taking care of problems? Is that a code enforcement kind of thing? So that would fall here?
Code enforcement would investigate in a complaint situation like that, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I guess my fear, I'll have a better understanding after your synopsis or kind of your overview of it to start with, but it feels like the complaint box, and that person, I just don't know at what level those complaints can be. How are we going? I don't know how we parse between, that's something we can deal with, and that we should and go deal with, and what is stuff that it's just not pressing or not, but it's pressing to those people. I mean, I get people all the time tell me, we need this and that in this neighborhood, and I'm like, well, you ought to see some of the other neighborhoods. They don't care. They're like, well, this is what we need, and it doesn't matter that they're, half their neighborhood's got curb and gutter and doesn't have stormwater problems. They don't look at the other part of the city. They want theirs right. They don't understand why theirs isn't right. It's going to be it's a very difficult balance. So I just hope we're and the bigger piece. And I worry about this as much as I think the efforts we've made to help or try to help the affordable housing situation. It's not that we shouldn't try to help or can't help. I don't want to give the false impression that we can solve this alone. And, you know, we're kind of getting out of our traditional lane here. And, I mean, it sounds like we're an extension of the housing and urban development here from the federal government. We're not. You know, that as far, I mean, I know they send funds, but you know what I'm saying? I hope you understand what I'm saying, because if our citizens are pinning 100% hope on us solving this problem, then they're mistaken. We need help from the state and the federal government, just like we always have. And really, the federal government's been the lead on a lot of this. So I just think we have to be really careful putting out there what our but we don't put expectations of our citizens where we can't achieve the goal. Does that make?
I couldn't agree with you more, and you're making perfectly logical sense. I agree with you. I do think that I hate to keep going back to the presentation that I do in the values. Everybody in the audience has heard this 100 times before. Excuse me. But one of the things that I think is happening in local government is things are changing. And old economic development guys like me are becoming dinosaurs. And I think part of the reason is that folks are not able to make change to be responsive to the needs that are coming up. I do believe that neighborhoods are the essence of cities nowadays, and that your response to their needs is important. Having said that, I do think that the city has gone over and beyond what the federal government does with regard to housing. But I also know we're not going to solve this issue. And the issue of inclusivity in Wilmington probably needed to be addressed 20 years ago in terms of housing.
Oh, no doubt. I guess it costs money is what it boils down to. It's not that we don't want to do it.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's a matter of, and it's also circular. I mean, okay, we raise taxes to pay for it, and then the price of renting a house goes. I mean, it's somewhat circular. So if we're just looking at our just the city dealing with it, I guess what I also don't want to give the false hope that, you know, we still, unless our goals are changing from a planning and you know, the future land use plan, we have a lot of infill that if we're going to keep our tax rate down and tap the infrastructure we already have. And that infill is almost always a NIMBY kind of situation, which is neighborhood driven. And are we telling them that this is where you go to fight infill?
No, I think that's still a planning issue. This department is designed to oversee the delivery of services in the city on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. And I'll just give you an example. Zoning would be one of them, but obviously they would go to the planning department for that. But we've got traffic issues in neighborhoods that might have differing solutions depending on which neighborhood it may be. We've got accessibility issues in some neighborhoods, and this council has been more than vocal and persistent and appropriate with regard to pedestrian traffic in some neighborhoods. And there are a myriad of other city-delivered services that may have to change based upon the neighborhood in which you're trying to provide the service. So I would say that you probably don't need to focus simply on zoning and development, but it's also going to be traffic and any other delivery of service on a neighborhood basis. But it will focus on housing, community compliance with regard to ordinances, and trying to differentiate services based upon neighborhood.
Do you envision some way to, like, neighborhood associations? I mean, who's the spokesman? You know, we've run into before where I want this sidewalk. I don't want it. I want this paved. I want this. No, I don't want that. Finding the consensus of what the neighborhood, sometimes it's crystal clear, you know, but a lot of times it's not. So you better have some kind of arbitrator or something running that department. So I've beat you up enough. I'm not really trying to beat you up. I'm just trying to understand it.
I do not take it as being beaten up. I expected a lot of questions about this. I certainly anticipate that council will scrutinize it closely. What I am just trying to avoid is allowing everything that doesn't fit into a current pigeonhole to have to roll up to a deputy manager or to the city manager to make sure it gets done.
All right, thank you.
Tony, just a question, in respect to this, because we get calls, all of us get calls about homelessness, their vegetation in somebody's neighbor's yard is blocking the view, the drainage system is not working properly, the road condition is terrible and deteriorating. So when we get a call like that, this person or this department head or whatever, that's who we're going to go to with it. Everything is kind of a catch-all for that particular, and I know that every department specializes in a particular situation, but we get a lot of calls that are pertaining to that kind of stuff. My trash didn't get picked up today. Something happened with a police issue. Could you follow up? Is this all that goes to that one department now?
No, sir, not necessarily. The things that fall into clear departments, police issues, those types of things, we would forward into the appropriate
Sure.
department. But the things that don't fit into the overgrown weeds, the dilapidated housing, the condition of trash on the streets, we're trying to allow the neighborhoods to identify as themselves and to be different and significant. And this would get those issues that cross over department lines. But the ones that are clear, like what is the zoning in an area? I don't have police service, my garbage got missed or something like that, then those would still go to the regular departments.
So okay, I guess this would hopefully fall under this particular individual's department, but for example, I think in the last 2 weeks I've participated in 2 meetings that have gone over 2 hours, or about 2 hours in length, in regards to homeless advocacy groups that are talking about dealing with temporary housing and where do we put that housing and what does the housing look like and what is the neighborhood impact going to be to the adjacent neighborhood that we may put this. Would this fall under that?
Yes, sir.
Because that was a lot of time and effort put into something that was just more of a bull session. Not a bull session, but getting into a lot of details that involved a lot of different folks, that involved a lot of time. So I'm just asking that question.
Yes, sir. We would envision that this would be the area in which a lot of the city's homeless outreach would go. For example, when the county came to us and wanted to do the downtown program with the police department and the social services department, we didn't have an intermediary in which to try to marry those two together. In terms of homelessness, we are, as you know, working with the county on a daily basis with regard to those issues. We're working with the Council of Governments on a daily basis with those issues. It obviously would be a very important function of this particular position in terms of who could we partner with and what programs could we bring forward, what programs are appropriate to bring forward to address that issue and to help with that issue.
Okay. Have a better understanding. Yes, sir. Mr.
Okay,
Barnett.
thank you, Tony. Just for clarity.
Yes, sir.
We want to make sure that we're saying this is not just for quote-unquote public housing.
No, sir.
It's for all neighborhoods, and you mentioned
Yes,
there are
sir.
40 neighborhoods in the city.
Yes, sir.
So-
We've got, for example, we have requests that come in for street extensions or sidewalk completions or those types of things. And I would see this department being, for example, an outreach into the community that would essentially survey, would take the pulse of the folks in that community with regard to improvements that they want to see. We've got a lot of property throughout town.
Sure.
This person would reach out and say, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think about it? Those types of issues.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Tony, the other thing is, in respect to this, we get a lot of calls, all of us do, for when speeders, or they want to reduce the speed limit in a particular area or particular neighborhood. Would this fall under that particular category. Or, for example, around the university, we'll get commentary about student housing that surrounds the university, where we've had a lot of issues over the years. I know that we have that committee that oversees that with the university, that tries to address those particular issues. Would this fall under that umbrella?
I would see that the University Community Relations Group would fall under this. In terms of the speeding, I would see that this position would work with police and traffic engineering to try to craft some sort of solution that might work for that neighborhood. But in terms of just pure speeding and I want somebody out there, you know, then that would be more of a police issue.
Okay, but this would, we could call this particular department head or call you and just say, hey, we get complaints on Rogerville Road or Hooker Road or Wrightsville, you know, in some of the internal neighborhoods, you know, where people are using them as cut-throughs to get from one side of town to the other. This would fall under that. So we would say, hey, we need to evaluate this particular area based on the complaints we're getting in that particular neighborhood.
And I see this position not necessarily, well, probably riding point on something like that, but being able to bring multiple departments together to craft some sort of solution for that's good for that neighborhood.
I see what you're talking about in respect to each neighborhood has its own DNA, I would
Yes,
say.
sir.
You have some neighborhoods where you have a lot of people that may be renting property and they take their lazy boys or some old piece of furniture and they throw it out on the side of the road. The neighborhood sees it. Nobody calls for bulk pickup. It stays there for a week or 2 weeks. People are complaining about it. This would fall under that particular department.
Yes, sir.
Or if we have another area and I got calls from some folks over in Lincoln Forest where the big drainage canal there has been blocked with some debris and we need to get stormwater in there. Would we go to this particular department, or you'd go to this particular department to steer those particular issues?
I can see it being an intake point as well, but again, stormwater-related issues we hope would go through stormwater. Your comment about the neighborhoods being different reminds me of when I first came here and I met Johnny Hennigan for the first time and over in Sunset Park, and I made some comment about being a like soul because we lived on Greenfield Lake when I was born, and he let me know right quick that Greenfield Lake was not Sunset Park. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, Charlie?
You've gone from soup to nuts on what this department is going to be responsible for. I mean, it's huge. I envision next budget year adding positions because one person, I mean, if that's going to be like a clearinghouse, that's a pretty daunting task, the way I see it. Let me finish. The other thing that I see is, I know y'all get tired of hearing me say I've been down here this long, but I have, but the lines have become so blurred on city municipality responsibilities here, and I'm sure it happens in other places. There are so many things that, well, there are things that we do that we shouldn't be responsible for doing. I mean, the county is the extension of the state. We serve at the pleasure of the General Assembly. And there are very specific things that we're required to do for the people that we manage. And some of the things we're doing, the county is doing them. And we're paying twice. And I have a real problem with that. And I see this as further down the road. I personally, when people call me, I will make a call. But Dave Mays can attest to it. I call them all the time. And there are others that I rely on. I like to stay involved because they called me. And I'm, I know that you have to delegate, but sometimes there's too much delegation going on. I want the person that I call to be responsible for it and keep me in the loop, because I'll see that person again. And it's just like when you're in the restaurant business, if somebody sends a steak back and it wasn't cooked right, you got one chance to make it right. If you don't get it right on that one, they'll never come back. You don't get to go out there multiple times. It's the same holds true when these people call. They've got a problem. most people have never had to call or never chose to call the city or the county or whatever. They're nervous as hell anyway. I see them come up to the podium sometimes, and I know they're nervous. I mean, we look like the Last Supper sitting up here. And when people call, they probably don't think anything's going to happen anyway. And we need to have quicker turnaround times on some of the problems. If it's a problem like a sidewalk, they know a sidewalk's not going to go out there and be built the next day. But if they've got a trash, or the neighbor is tacky or stuff like that, we need to be able to act quicker. And if this department, if you can assure me that this one person is going to make that kind of make a big difference, I'm all for it.
I would argue, first of all, I did not mean for it to be a soup to nuts solution. It's not intended to be.
Well, I mean, you've covered a wide range of,
Yes.
You've had these questions from us up here, and, police, you said, no, that would go to police, stormwater would go to stormwater. There's a lot of things that this big umbrella.
Yes, sir, I agree. And what I was getting ready to say was that complaints that are specific to a particular department may wind up in this, on this person's desk, but it winds up on somebody's desk regardless. And it would be referred to the appropriate department. I think nothing changes there. When it comes in, it still goes to that. It comes into Tracy, comes into Dawn, they know where it should go. But if it comes in and it's a dirty neighborhood type of thing, or a more comprehensive neighborhood type of thing, then it would go into this department. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I couldn't agree with you more that there are functions that the city is bleeding over into that that typically counties would cover. And we have to be very diligent, and I am diligent with the staff on a daily basis about what we ought to be doing and what we ought not to be doing. But the truth be known, the city is the complaint department for many of these issues, and I see the council as being put on the hot seat with regard to some of these issues because the county is not as responsive, or for some reason doesn't follow through with what the folks think ought to be done. And I think cities were put together mainly to provide an additional level of service. Do I think they need to be providing social services? Absolutely not. But I do think there are times when I see folks get their figurative hands around the figurative necks of council members for services that somebody else ought to deliver, but not necessarily is falling through the cracks. And I see that as one of these issues.
Well, just because they're not doing their job, as you say, doesn't mean that we should take it. We probably need to have a pipeline of communication that's a little stronger and hold their feet to the fire and make them do it. They know what their responsibilities are.
Yes, sir, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Let me take an example, like Hooker Road, for example. It started out, we had one individual that would let us know very regularly, and I don't even remember how long ago that was, very long time ago.
10 years.
10 years. And the truth be told, right now, the best I can tell, if you took if it was a democracy out there on that road, that trail would not be built. So that neighborhood saying, we don't want this. Yet we're going, well, it's coming. And meanwhile, you got people on, this is the one that's been glaring for years, and I'm sure there's a good answer, but the real answer is probably their students, and they don't have much of a voice unless their chancellor speaks up for them, or unless somehow we get a call from the university. And how they have it, and when you drive down within half mile to a mile of the campus on Wilshire Boulevard, the goat path is crystal clear. Go there during a class change. And, I feel responsible for the safety of those kids when they're off campus. And that's beyond needed, past needed. It's been needed for a decade. And it just keeps getting no attention. Yet we're going to go build a sidewalk for somebody that doesn't want it. So with this, Does this department get in there and weigh those facts? Should we take the money from Hooker Road and build it on Wilshire? Where does that go?
Not in this department.
Okay. Well, it's neighborhoods. Hooker doesn't want it.
Yeah, but it's also a transportation issue. It's also a CIP issue. And you can bet that when your new CIP comes forward, it will have a sidewalk on Wilshire Boulevard. But the point is that I see that as a more specific issue that is addressed by transportation than it is by neighborhood. But again, it doesn't mean that this person wouldn't get involved. I just don't see it as primarily their responsibility.
Okay.
Can I chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been waiting a long time. So Tony, here's my thing. We talk about the formation of this new department. Who does this new department report to? Which deputy city manager?
Either Tom Moten or Chad McEwen, we haven't made that decision yet.
Okay, so refresh my memory on what Tom typically handles and what Chad typically handles.
Tom typically handles community services and public services. Chad typically handles fire department, economic development, and planning.
Okay, so that kind of seems like a no-brainer. Tom would oversee this, right?
Potentially.
I mean, go ahead.
We're going to look at workload.
Okay. And I get it. I've heard everyone's opinions of everybody's comments about, what we think about this. And to an extent, I agree and disagree. I also feel that as we evolve as people, our roles change. So you kept trying to describe or define what you were doing here, and you were saying, let's not be reactive, but you didn't use the word proactive. And I think you're trying to be proactive. And I think it is needed. But then also, what's wrong with community services still handling it? And because ultimately, I'll use myself as an example. When I need something done, I typically text you or I text Tom if I know it's everything's in your wheelhouse. But if I know something's in Tom's wheelhouse, I text Tom. And then I let him delegate to whom should handle it. So I don't really see this being any different.
I think the issue for me is, you say I haven't used the word proactive, I've used the word strategic. I could almost be those words for me could almost be interchangeable, but regardless, I think what it is now is it is a reactive measure on the part of the city that falls into the DCM's wheelhouse, despite whether it's Chad or Tom. And if the level of service and the level of response is okay with council, then I think we can continue to do what we're doing moving forward. I think there are opportunities for economies of scale in combining some of the code enforcement staff under one department to be able to take advantage of the available time and experience. But again, I want to express that if council is satisfied with the response that the city is now providing, I think it's only going to continue to grow as these neighborhoods become more and more important in city government. I really do believe it's going to become a neighborhood-oriented function. But if council is okay with it as it is, and it being a responsive in matter in nature, I'll be glad to stand down with this request.
But Tony, let me just say this really quick, because you're saying the creation of a department, director of housing and neighborhood services, and that's just one full-time employee. So this person is just directing themselves.
The position's overseen by a DCM who would work with them on a work plan for accomplishment of objectives during the year.
But that person would have no staff.
No, they have the community services staff that is not recreation, and then they also have the additional code enforcement folks that'll be coming over from public services.
Okay.
Luke?
Hearing how confusing this is to all of us up here, I can only imagine if it was to be implemented, how confusing it would end up being to the public on who handles what and what this was supposed to be. To me, this program, I think, is well-intentioned. I used the term nebulous before, but it's murky, and it doesn't seem ready to deploy. What I think the spirit of what you're trying to do here is to a continuation of our front-facing public continuity services. And there's maybe some sort of disconnect with the public, people coming to us on where things need to go, primarily in neighborhoods, but outside of that too. I think we can refine this program. I think having a one-stop shop, email, phone number, click and put it in the chat box on our website is a good initiative. And then to funnel that via our org chart to wherever it needs to go. I think it is certainly feasible and would really increase the value of the hard work that we do here at the city. I think that looks different than this, but I think it would achieve what you're trying to do here and more. But this program, as it stands right here, it doesn't seem ready to deploy, and I think it's going to cause you and the staff more work and heartache than it would alleviate.
Well, I regret that I'm not doing a good job of explaining what this position would do. I do not feel it's nebulous in my mind, but my mind is a big open space too sometimes. I would also say once again that it gives us the opportunity to take this from being a reactive to being a more strategic type of initiative. But again, if council's comfortable with what the level of service that's currently being provided, then we certainly can move ahead with it.
All right.
Yes, sir.
I'm comfortable with this. I'm not as confused as some others are. And the other thing that I think about is, as you mentioned earlier, things are changing, and people need services. There are a number of services that folks need, and my thought is always, if we don't fix it now, if we can help now, and if we choose not to, it's going to become a bigger problem later on. So I think that you guys will be able to iron it out as relates to who gets what and when it comes in. But I'm definitely in favor of it, and I think that we shouldn't pull back.
Yes, go ahead, Neil.
And perhaps, coming out of this meeting, it'd be awesome to have kind of that org chart kind of thing, something more visual to see. We're moving to, when I read it first, I didn't really get that there's going to be all these, like people working under this person. It felt like it was one human going to handle this. So what dollars were moved, the org chart, some visuals of, is this, some of this money, we already, like code enforcement, that's just going in this, under this silo, right?
The code enforcement that's currently housed in community services would go in this silo, right, as would the housing that's currently housed in community services.
So the net addition here is that one salary.
Is that one position that oversees those two functions that comes out of the community services department, leaving the recreation department to stand alone as its own.
And the the existing, whatever we want to call them, sub-departments or that would
Divisions.
now fall,
Division.
divisions that would fall under them are code enforcement, who else?
Housing and community development.
So is that Suzanne?
Yes,
So it's Suzanne and Brian?
yes.
Anyone else?
Not that I recall it.
The budget has a housing counselor addition,
That is part of the CDBG program.
so that would be standalone from this.
That
under
would be
CDBG.
that would be part of this, the part of this department. Anything that is under housing, CDBG now, as well as code enforcement, which would then bring code enforcement out, a second division of code enforcement out of public services into this department.
So it's most of the federal pass-through stuff too. It goes through, will go through here.
And the 1 penny that we're putting towards
All right, thank you.
Tom, did you want to say something?
Yes, Mayor and members of council, thank you for consideration. The driving impetus for analyzing and making an adjustment was we recognized that over the 5 or 6 years, the focus on parks and programming as well as urban forestry has changed. It's been enhanced. The expectations for consistent, excellent service delivery is the expectation today. And I also feel, and this is my opinion, professional opinion, based on my training experience, that 90% of community services budget is devoted to urban forestry, parks and recreation, and programming. 10% is the housing code enforcement. Yet, what really consumes Amy Beatty's time, Amy Beatty is the director, oftentimes is the housing and the code enforcement. And so in essence, we're trying to do a lot of things in one large department, but the time that you can devote to executing consistently well is lacking. And my concern is the expectations for one director is to be soup to nuts to everything, because the person we're talking about that's ultimately responsible for all the areas we've discussed is Amy Beatty, Community Services Director. And there is an industry practice to focus on Parks and Recreation as a standalone agency, and there's opportunities for us to improve the service and also be more mindful of costs and try to extract more efficient, cost-effective service delivery. Councilmember Anderson's been involved with us really on the ground level with Legion Stadium, and I think there's opportunities for us to improve. There's also precedent for cities to focus on the HUD and Community Development Block Grant money as a department. And neighborhood services, as Tony said, there are issues that erupt all the time, and we're going out in the field. The most recent one was Dave Mays and Amy Beatty and I went out in the field to talk to a gentleman about neighborhood issues, overgrown alleys, and a lack of attention. We believe there's an opportunity not only to respond to complaints, but to be more proactive, to go out and assess neighborhoods and engage residents and say, you know, what are the issues that you see on the forefront? Homelessness, affordable housing comes up quite a bit. We're working on day shelters, so there are a variety of issues that, in my opinion, it's unfair for one director to be assumed to excel at all of those different things. And from my perspective, I think we'd be better served if we had some focus on it. And thank you for giving me the time to add to the conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Tom. It seems to me, in listening to everything, that instead of making it more confusing, the idea is there's a point person that will be clearly illustrated on the website and whatever we put out, and they will be a clearinghouse of sorts to make sure that concerns get to the right department and the right person. I mean, this is one person. I think it sounds like a good idea, and it's worth a try.
Well, again, I would say our clearinghouse is probably the two best people in our clearinghouse are Dawn and Tracy, in terms of they take most of these calls in, they find out where they need to go, and they go to the right place. This position would get involved when there are overlapping departments, when there are issues associated with housing or lack thereof, and the condition of neighborhoods, specifically with regard to code enforcement. again, going back to what Tom said, which is what I opened with, which is there are issues associated with these two divisions being associated with Parks and Recreation. I think it will give us an opportunity to focus on Parks and Recreation, but I think the most important thing is it gives us an opportunity to focus on housing and community development. But again, if this is something that I have not made clear to council or you don't believe is necessary, then we certainly can back away from the proposal.
No, I think it's necessary. I mean, the focus on neighborhoods is extremely important. I mean, that's where we get a lot of our calls as council members, is what's happening in a specific citizen's neighborhood, whatever it may be. And I think that you do need to have a laser focus on making certain that we're addressing those particular issues. You know, we get a lot of calls about, at least I do, about the maintenance of alleys. I know a lot of them are private for whatever reason, and people expect us to pave a private alley, which obviously we can't use taxpayers' money on private property, on private road, although we pick up on those private roads when there are trash cans in the rear of the properties, like we see a lot in Forest Hills and even in the downtown area. But you know, making certain that individuals, and I think most individuals understand that unless somebody's moved new or is new to the area, has moved into that neighborhood, that is not aware of that, and then you have to explain it to them, and you know, this is what the case is.
Again, if I haven't been clear enough, if this needs further baking, then we certainly can go back and do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with it, yeah.
Well, whoever this person is, I wouldn't want to be them. I mean, we're going to expect a new day and a new dawning. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. I mean, this is going to take care of everything. And I hope it will.
Tony, I just want to clarify. I wasn't confused. I just want to make sure that we don't start something and we don't have enough staff available to do what's expected, because I think, like other council members have said, this is going to be a very heavy load for just one person. And if you're saying there are people designated from other departments that will join this department that will handle some of this, but they will also have to split some of their duties now, I believe. So I'm just want you to have the forward thinking, not saying that you don't, but that you would have the forward thinking ability to say we need to bring some people in that are just specific of that. And I'm saying that we should probably be thinking along those lines now than 6 months down the road, and then we really have to beat you up about it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Can I ask another question on another matter, if that's okay? Is everybody all right with that?
I'm here to answer questions
Well,
today.
you know, we have a golf course advisory committee, and I know that they're very sensitive to the issues of the golf course. And one of the things that they have been talking to us about is, of course, an irrigation system or upgrade to the irrigation system out there that has to come out of an enterprise fund. And I understand that there's a study to determine what those costs will be and how you're going to put it together. Are we talking about making an irrigation improvement next year?
No, sir. It's anticipated that it would be completed as a part of the forthcoming CIP in the coming year.
In this coming year?
It would be included in the CIP for funding for the next fiscal year.
For next fiscal year, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think they're very clear on that, and I think I explained it.
As opposed to 24, we would expect to be able to see that done in fiscal year 25.
Ooh, okay. We just need to make certain that they understand clearly where we are in that process. I would anticipate that we're getting over 60,000 rounds of golf out there, and their concern is because some of the courses have closed down and there's been a significant uptick in play out there, that we don't just destroy the place, and not destroy, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
And I guess the concern has been with some of the irrigation out there being antiquated and old, and it is, and I know we've made a lot of improvements over the years out there, but we do have a marvelous jewel out there that people love, and we just want to make sure that we're maintaining it. But we need to be very clear, whoever the liaison is between the city and the committee there, as to when the specific date that the action will take place, so they understand it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Yes, sir, Mr. Neal.
Tony, this is, I think I sent you an email about this. You may have responded, but I hadn't checked in like the last 36 hours, been on the road with work. Is not this work, with other work. And these bollards that have popped up, one, they're main intersection down here at, I mean, basically our front door to the city, our doormat, now looks like crowd control, or I'm not sure what it looks like. It looks horrible. It's also at 17th and Castle. And not an engineer, but it looks like what they're doing is there's street parking, and they don't want the state, I presume, doesn't want you to go through that intersection and rear end these cars that are parked there. I've never seen that happen, so I don't know if there's a track record of that. I'm not there all the time, although I go through both those intersections a fair amount. Are they gonna? I don't want those to stay, is what I'm getting to. And if we need to build, if the state's not willing to do it, if we need to build bump outs there that are curb and gutter and sidewalk, we need to be evaluating the cost of that and everything, because it's just hideous. I mean, it's like they tried as little as possible to make it blend in or look nice. So what can you tell me about that?
I'm going to let Tom Moten come forward and give you a little more detail on it, but I will tell you that it was a NCDOT-initiated project that was designed to be placed out there for a 90-day period to see if it was going to be effective. And our traffic engineering folks have worked with NCDOT to affect that. If we did go to some sort of physical barrier as opposed to these, a more permanent physical barrier as opposed to these, it would be quite costly, and we'd need to include it in our CIP because we'd have to reroute storm drainage and that type of thing. But Tom, I'm going to let you, if you would.
Yes, Mr. City Manager. So to be real clear, the pilot program was initiated by the state, DOT's Integrated Mobility Division. And what they want to do first is just study and examine if the deployment of bollards has the effect that they believe it has. It is a process that's been used. 90 days is the duration, the study. And one of the benefits of shortening the crossing distance is your signals don't have to stay red as long for people to cross safely. So that's one benefit. You can move traffic through faster. The other benefit is when pedestrians are trying to cross the street, oftentimes motorists will cut right in front of them. I'm sure you've seen that oftentimes. By pushing out the distance they have to travel, it allows the pedestrians to kind of clear that area. It's not permanent, and the city has the opportunity after 90 days to study the issues to determine if we'd like to move forward with something else. As Mr. Cottle said, if we determine that we want to do a curb or a bump out, we're going to be doing excavation, we've got to reroute stormwater, and those kinds of decisions can easily hit $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. So if you just want to test something, I think this is what you would call a cost-effective way to see if it reduces the risk to pedestrians and cyclists, as well as helps motorists understand they need to sort of stay in their position until the crosswalk is clear. The state identified our location and a few others across the state as a measure to see if a permanent solution can be made. This is a state-maintained road. Perhaps we can have a conversation with the state that we like the concept and the benefits it provides for increasing pedestrian safety, but we'd like to see something permanent added. I just think we want to go through the process of 90 days and sort of letting them finish their evaluation beforehand. They are ugly, by the way. I will agree with you.
I would like, and we have emails about this, to see some statistics about accidents, pedestrian injuries, whatever that initiated this test. I don't think we ought to do anything permanent. I don't really see a huge problem there. We're going to have poor drivers. I haven't seen it slow anybody down. And the intersections where they put it really are not that heavily pedestrian. Maybe at Market and Third, there are a lot of pedestrians coming and going. So what if the light is 2 seconds longer? I mean, we're creating a problem here. Somebody's creating a problem so that they can then create a solution. And I don't think there's a problem. So I would like to see what the statistics are that promoted this idea that we have to go to some extreme. I think it would be absurd to reroute stormwater and put in some sort of permanent thing. I think it's ridiculous. Paint some lines on the street. Don't have cars parked so close to the intersection, something like that. But this seems ridiculous to me. And I get that it's temporary, it's awful looking, it's just elementary and dumb looking, first of all. I don't know that people understand what it is, what they're supposed to do, or anything about it. So I just think it's a solution in search of a problem. And I don't think we ought to even contemplate doing anything until we know what the statistics are, what promoted this. Tell us exactly. Over what period of time? 5 years? What, 3 years? What has happened that this is such an issue?
So my intention is not to appear to be advocating one way or another, just provide information.
Yeah, I get it.
I did send an email to council that was from the state yesterday that provided statistics and details.
Oh, I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
didn't see it.
And some of the data that they provided staff, we asked them to provide it. Since 2010, there have been 5 pedestrian crashes at Market and Third and 1 pedestrian crash at 17th and Council. Just to also put this in context, you recall council, citizens on Market Street came to council and said, we had a red light at Ann, I believe at Dock, because of issues with safety. So this is in that same corridor where pedestrian safety has been an issue. The other item that they indicate here, and this again, this is the state's data, not mine, reducing vehicle speeds is fundamental to reducing the number and severity of pedestrian crashes. Speeding was a contributing factor in 29% of all crashes in 2021, and pedestrian chances of surviving a crash would be greatly increased if speeds were slower. So we have that information that was provided to you. That's the extent of what staff has. But I do want to be clear, I'm not advocating one way or another, and this was not an initiative that staff sought out to get done.
So at Castle Street, in 10 years, 13 years, in 13 years, there's been 1 incident.
There's been 1 recorded incident. You know, my experience.
I mean, and we're going to go to this extreme because of that? I mean, we don't know what the details were. You know.
And of course, now Castle Street is changing. It's transitioning from what it was 10 years ago to a very heavy residential area with a lot of commercial opportunities. Distilleries are down there. There's an opportunity for more foot traffic to be there. I think what I'm hearing is council has always been on record of supporting improving safety for pedestrians and cyclists.
Well, there's no question, and that's one reason I don't know, are we spending the money to put these lights up with the hands because nobody's taught how to cross the street anymore? You know, to say stop, go, whatever. I mean, just idiot lights that people don't know how to cross the street. So we've already spent a bunch of money doing that. So what if that light, instead of 11 seconds, it's 13 seconds? You know, we and the state or whoever is spending money putting that up. I mean, what are we going to have escorts next that get people across the street? I mean, this is just bizarre to me. Whatever. I just need
Go ahead, Neil.
quit.
Respectfully, Tom, your examples, apples and oranges, speed and then what they want up there, what they want, the Hawk light, that's where people, I mean, they're just such a different animal to me. Those bollards are not going to help speed. I mean, it will help. Potentially, I think the argument is there that it helps a turn right pedestrian pedestrian be safer. I think that's an accurate argument, but I think what that community, historic district wants there is a way to cross safely up there in mid-block. There's a stoplight, you know, that should stop traffic and make it with walk signs. But I just, if this is what they want to do, I hope they're bringing their wallet with them. I hope they're bringing their checkbook, because, you know, if this is something they think's there, they need to do it, and they need to do it right.
So Tom, they're studying the area there around where the cargo district is?
Well, they have one at Castle and 17th for that purpose.
I've seen a lot of people crossing that particular area.
And the speed is really the speed in which one turns the corner, the intersection. You know, it makes you slow down by having to go out a little bit farther.
So in the intersection here at 3rd and Market, I know a lot of people, when they cross, they get out into the road a little bit. We've had some people that have even been brushed back or the cars touched them. Is that to kind of push that protective island a little bit further out into 3rd or into Market? Because if you're coming down 3rd, heading this way, heading north,
Right.
and you make a right-hand turn at Market to go up Market Street, sometimes the pedestrian will get out into the road,
Right.
and that person is making a right-hand turn, doesn't see them, and brushes them back. Because there's a lot of people that park up in this area and walk down, and I see that a lot in the evenings. So that's primarily what they're evaluating right now. So if they have to push that bulb out a little bit more, like for a protective island, they'll do it.
Right. That's my understanding.
They're not going to come back to us and ask us for the improvement.
You know, what was interesting was the WMPO director wasn't aware of this, and so while our staff worked with them to coordinate it, we didn't have a lot of advanced information. It would have been nice to have been engaged in the conversation, but my understanding is the intent is to provide a refuge for pedestrians to get a little bit farther out so they can cross the street in the time frame that traffic is stopped.
I can see it up here. I've seen it up here a couple of different times where the pedestrian actually walks out into the road a little bit. And I think there's just a sightline issue when you're coming down 3rd, especially right there, right next to the Episcopal Church there, where I see a lot of it when the person's trying to make that right-hand turn. I get it, okay. Yeah, well, I understand that. Okay. Tony?
As I said, we're here to answer questions.
This is just the bull session. We can just anything we want to say.
We're here to answer questions, sir.
Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Luke, I know you got some questions down there.
Well, first is just a kind of, I guess, a philosophical one, and then I just have a list of, I'm just going to go down and ask a few questions just as related to the various items of the budget. That shouldn't take very long at all, but we talked about it at length last year, but I still remain opposed to the council stipend increasing. But was it part of the original plan? Maybe I just missed it last year, but was it part of the original plan for us to then get lumped in with staff's merit increases, or is this a new initiative?
That was part of the original plan. A 3-year plan was to get you up to speed, and then, as you say, lump you in with the staff increases so that you wouldn't fall behind again.
Yeah, I'd take I mean, I know this was implemented long before I was here, and I respect that. But I do take issue with that. I think anytime we decide we're going to have increases for ourselves and we voted in for ourselves, that it should be a separate consideration from the rest of the staff. So that's something I'll probably be bringing up when we do actually vote on approving a budget, and don't want to blindside the rest of my fellow members up here with that. We could debate it if anybody wants to, but that's my opinion. Moving forward, if anybody wants to jump in, just jump in. Page 28 of the budget, I'm sorry, page 22 of the budget. This, provided we're fortunate enough to purchase the Thermo Fisher building and that campus, the North Campus, the acquisition and the 8 positions, that 679, 688 number, is that cost budget as part of the overall OpEx that we were forecasting, or is this separate from that.
Chad?
Thank you, sir. Good morning. My understanding is that those positions, those 8 positions, are part of the operating expense for the building.
Good, great. Thank you. Page 25, there's a strat plan performance manager funded at 137,285. I get that. There's a little clause at the end that says the strategic plan needs a coordinator to ensure completion of these cross-departmental objectives. Is that advocating for an additional position, a coordinator position, or is that just stating that the strategic plan performance manager will be the coordinator to execute?
That's advocating for a new position.
The manager position, not the manager plus a coordinator.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. I'm in the lightning round right now, Cliff. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Chad, and what's the update on the Thermo Fisher?
We are waiting on the local government commission to approve the financing for the acquisition of the building. We were informed yesterday that we are the last item on the June 6th agenda for the LGC meeting, and we don't know yet whether there'll be a vote on it or not, so we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, thanks. Lightning round.
All right, page 28, general fund budget summary. Interest earnings go from 481,000 in 2023 to 1.2 in 24. Is these interest earnings projections just related to interest rate increases?
Yes, they are related to interest rate increases. They're designed for one-time expenditures so that we don't become dependent on an undependable revenue source.
Understood. Page 35. Northern downtown parking deck. We have, provided we're able to purchase this, here's our fee structure.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any sort of chance, or have you guys been able to do any sort of income projections, what we just anticipate being able to collect from that?
Chance?
Good morning. Put me on the spot here.
Sorry.
We've done very conservative estimates year one, mainly based on concert special event revenue. I think the rate we're recommending is $20 per car, roughly 200 to 300 cars per event for year one. So somewhere around the 300,000 mark, I think, on the special event revenue year one, and then very, very nominal additional revenue beyond that as kind of activity continues to build up on the commercial side up there.
And is that just the deck?
That's just the deck, yes.
All right. And how does that perform? How is that as related to some of our other decks? Is that pretty in line, or is it just different because that's really just when there's special events that people are going to be utilizing that deck?
It's long-term, it'll be very comparable, but I think it's going to be heavily geared and in service for the special event traffic for the public up there initially. But revenue-wise, the other decks are averaging $300,000 to $500,000 per year on kind of gross revenue. So we're getting close to that just on the special event side, and we'll hit that mark pretty quick.
Great.
A few years down the line.
I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do the other decks charge like $20 an event? Is it like 10 or what?
The only deck that really services the larger park events is the convention center for the special event rate. Right now it's 15. We're recommending that also goes up to 20 for the larger park events. When the park opened for events 2 years ago, we started the special event rate for the event nights at River Place, Market, and Second, but stopped that pretty quickly because it's such a diverse group of users at the core of the CBD and those decks that it just wasn't advantageous to charge that flat rate for the folks coming down for dinner and whatnot. So mostly the other decks, we charge a special event rate during the 4th of July, Riverfest, Zelly Fest, that type of stuff. $10 at Market, Second, and River Place.
Well, these numbers, that $20, is that something, I don't get out to the concerts like a lot of the other ones up here do, but is that kind of like the middling? Is that about what people are charging in other
The
cities?
private lots across the street there at Harnett and 3rd, Harnett and 4th, I believe they are charging 30 and are nearly sold out every event. I think Cape Fear is currently at 15, but potentially following our lead at 20. And the Kettler parking deck in the Pier 33 that just opened up this year for special event, I think they're at 25 now, and from what I'm hearing, will be going up from 25 very quickly. So we're just slightly under what I would say market rate up there for special events.
It's worth it, yeah.
Couple things, while you're on that, I mean, I would say this, you know, Kettler, I understand, if you want to pay a premium to park, you know, within whatever, 15 yards of the gate, they can probably charge whatever they want. And they can. It's their lot. But where we are, I mean, already, as you probably have heard, it's unrelated to your department, but we get hammered about that being a public park and that being, you know, paying $16 for a beer, and you know, the tickets are $300 or $400, you know, and we've kind of deflect that a little bit because we don't run the beer, we don't run the ticket prices. But that'll be our deck if we are fortunate enough to get it. So I would just advocate for I'm not saying give it away, but we don't have to max it out. We don't need another thing where we're adding, you know, 15 to me would be, right now those people get it 20 because there's nowhere else to go, you know, and they can kind of, it's not gouging, but I mean, they're supplying a service. I just feel like we need to be careful that we're not just tacking on more and more to this. It's an awesome facility, but at some juncture, you have 40 concerts and you know, 2 people going's $500. You know, to all in. I mean, we need to recover what we need to recover to pay for that deck, but we don't need to be killing them. I don't know what that number is. 20 just seems heavy to me for 3 hours. The other thing, I guess there's really no way but to do it, but did you, I mean, we've got the hopefully that east, you know, sometime in the next several years that east-west, or if that doesn't work out, that area to be developed, that would certainly increase that parking number considerably.
Yes, sir. Like I told Councilman Waddell, the initial projections are really special event driven to cover our expenses, and the public transient daily monthly parker side will pick up drastically year 2, 3, and beyond.
But I mean, as that north end develops, I mean, it could be full all day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we did long-term projections 5, 10, 20 years out, and, you know, the event, it starts to balance out and probably shift the other direction 5+ years down the line if our projections come out.
Thank you, Chance.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Page 77, the very last, under sundry appropriations, the very last on the citywide studies, there's nothing, and then nothing from 22 or 23, and then recommended for 24 is $200,000. I'm just curious what changed. And don't feel the need to come up to the dais every time if you don't want to. I mean, you can do it from the desk. I don't care. Yeah, you're here now, but I've got like 3 more.
Good morning. So what is included in there is there are several studies. One, the RFP actually just went out. We are taking a holistic look at our health insurance, including our dental and our clinic. And so we're looking for a third party to come in and look at the structure, how much we pay, what employees pay, what the city does, and provide, again, a holistic look at that so we can bring some recommendations back next year to City Council as part of the budget process. Also included in there is funding to do a Parks and Rec fee study. so that we can look holistically at all of our fees over in Parks and Rec and bring back some recommendations again in next year's budget. That's why we held off on doing some of the fee increases this year there.
Okay. So those two studies are the
Right now, and
citywide.
yes, and there's additional funding there if something else comes up, but those are the two major studies
All
right now.
Great, great. Yep.
Wait, Mary, before you leave.
Yeah.
So there is nothing, no new fee changes for Parks and Rec currently, right?
There's a few minor ones, I think, associated with golf. Is that correct?
Just the golf stuff?
Just, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So the Parks and Rec fee study, I get the health insurance, that's pretty technical. I mean, that's an expertise kind of thing. What do you anticipate, I mean, I anticipate, or what I hear is this, what in my mind is this Parks and Recs thing, they're just gonna go out to a bunch of other cities and see what they charge and tell us ours are low and you should raise them to do this. I mean, is that, some of these studies we do, they just like, at the end of the day, I'm like, didn't we already know all that? Couldn't we have just talked to some of the cities that we are comparable and they just send us their fees? Couldn't we just go online and look at their fee schedule and see? I mean, what do you anticipate them doing that's worth a bunch of money?
Well, some of it, I would anticipate is Parks and Rec is sometimes difficult to compare across municipalities based on service levels and demand and things that are offered. And so that's part of it. The other thing is to really look at cost recovery. So it's not just comparing, you know, what is the fee, it's also what is it costing us to provide the service, and then what is our cost recovery for that. And then, you know, that's ultimately what we bring back to council is what do you want our cost recovery policy to be? Because currently, you know, I don't even know what that number would be, but is it 80% that we're trying to cost recover in terms of our revenue? Is it 50? How much should we be subsidizing our parks program? And that may vary across the different programs. So it's a little more complicated than that, and it also takes a look at where is the private sector in some of the services that we provide as well, and whether or not what we are charging for that compared to what they do too. So
Is your line of thinking that it should be become more of a enterprise fund?
No, it's just making sure that we have a agreed upon philosophy as a city about what we charge for our park services and our recreation programs, and really ensuring that there's an understanding of what we're paying to provide it and what we're recouping. And usually municipalities or places that provide these services establish some sort of policy that says, you know, that's something we as government should be providing and a service to the community, and we want to subsidize it at, let's say, 80%. So we want to ensure that our fees over time are not growing more than that. And so that's part of it as well.
I get that. I mean, we get a lot of tournament play at MP Park. We're replacing how many tennis courts over there? And I guarantee you, if you went out there and polled the amount of people that use that facility, and I'm out there almost every, you know, I go out there and walk around there. I guarantee you, there's all those people that are playing out there are not not citizens of Wilmington. And I see a lot of the tournament play that's out there. We're getting a lot of demand for pickleball, and a lot of pickleball players are not even from Wilmington. They're from other areas. And I also see it with the softball. I've seen it at Legion Stadium with lacrosse and all the other tournament play, and now with gyms that we're putting in place where you're going to have tournaments, people are going to be coming to you asking for tournament play at those different gyms from time to time. I think we do need to recover much of that. I know we do it on the road races, and I know we do it on the triathlon, and we do it on the marathon, and we use a lot of city services to conduct that. I mean, it's good for business, it's good for the community, it's support of the region, but there should be a clawback of some sort for the amount of money that city taxpayers are having to maintain those facilities for. And I just think that, you know, the more you guys dive into this thing, and I know that we get a lot of demands for more tournament play and more road races, and we were saying we can't take but so much, and I get that, and we just need to make sure that we're recouping our cost as a community for those citizens that are having to maintain the infrastructure every single day that reside here and pay for it. And there's a lot of people that love this region and say they're residents of Wilmington, but they live in the unincorporated areas or in surrounding counties that use our facilities every single day. I just want to make sure that we're getting our clawback, our percentage back on that. And yes, we should provide a level of service. That's what cities do. But at the same time, we need to maintain our infrastructure. And when our citizens go out there to play, whatever it is, and the facility looks terrible because we're not putting money back into it, we're the ones that get the call for it. And they say, what's wrong? So we need to make sure that we're getting our money back, as much of it as possible. And 80% is, I think, fair to try to claw back, especially with a lot of the tournament playing I see happening day in and day out. And you know, I'm all for it. But it does have an impact on the infrastructure that we have to maintain every single day, including our city streets, which we can't recoup, but that's another issue in itself. Keep going.
I know this might be a little frustrating for everybody. I appreciate everybody indulging me. I don't have too many more. This is a budget workshop, so that's what I'm doing. Page 83, that bullet points under administrative CDHM grant and loan administration fund. It says general fund contribution $381,472. This represents an increase in 193 and change to support the impacts of the compensation study and the new housing counselor in response to the city's new certification. I didn't see a reference to that certification. What was the reference, or what was the certification that predicated this new this need for a new position, and what are we getting out of it?
Suzanne, is this the loan certification? The housing counselor? Yeah, go ahead.
There was a change in requirements for the use of HUD funds for housing loans. About a year ago, we brought an item to council, and it required that any funds used, any federal funds used for loans, that there had to be housing counseling provided by a HUD-certified housing counselor. So we moved forward with becoming a certified housing counseling agency and adding that position last year.
So we get funding, we get HUD funding, and it's just allocated to this new position?
We can allocate some of our HUD funding towards that.
Right.
We also are a member of the North Carolina Housing Coalition Housing Counseling Network, and we do get some HUD pass through to them, to us.
Okay.
But it doesn't fully cover the full cost.
Okay, all right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Charlie? Go ahead.
On page 82, under some economic incentives, I was just looking at the third one down, Wrightsville Beach Galleria. What are we incentivizing them to do?
That's the payment that we make to the town of Wrightsville Beach in exchange for
ABC.
the
Got it.
lost revenue at the Galleria.
It threw me when it was
Yes, sir.
titled that way.
Yes, sir. Not many people remember the Galleria anymore, so.
Well, that's, unfortunately, I do.
Following up on that, I can't remember how long ago that's been, for one. Is this, because as I remember the way it played out was for 25 years or some long length of time, 20 years, we would pay whatever the value of the property, the tax value property at the time would go to Wrightsville Beach. The delta would go to the city. And if it increased in value, the delta would go to the city, and then after so many years, that would just all go to the city. Is that simple?
It was, how many years, Laura? 10?
It goes through 2043.
2043. What it was it anticipated a tax value that was current at the time that would extend for either 2 or 3 years, and then we projected what the value of the property would be beyond that, with development on it, which obviously is not realized, but with development on it, and then we assessed Wrightsville Beach's tax rate against that projected development value, which would then be the payment that we would make.
So is this payment the amount, basically, of the tax value at the time at the Wrightsville Beach rate?
No, it's the projected value of the property developed.
So in other words, right now, we're coming out of pocket because nothing's been developed a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
So we're going to be paying Wrightsville Beach. I mean, the development's going to occur in the corporate limits of Wilmington, and when you add that development, obviously the tax value skyrockets, and that's what the payment's going to be based on?
Based upon, as I recall, it was Wrightsville Beach's tax rate assessed against a redeveloped value. Yes, sir.
Well, okay, so right now I think they're got a proposed 13 cent on the 100. So, I mean, that, of course, they're never going to raise their tax rate. I mean, is that a fair statement? I mean, so, yeah. I mean, they
Yes.
raise the parking rates, but never the tax rate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would agree with that.
Okay.
Tony, doesn't that have a sunset clause in there? When it was,
I don't have that information in front of us. I can try and get that, though.
Pardon me?
I don't have that information in front of us, but I can try
Yeah,
and
we're
get it.
going to have to get that and come
And
back to you. We're working off my memory, which is never good.
I remember that whole thing, but I thought there was some sort of a sunset at some point in time where it would go away.
Yeah, there is a termination date of the agreement. I don't remember what it is.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So the agreement ends 2043.
So the agreement ends at 23, so they get a percentage of that till 2043?
They get 30,000 each year.
30,000 each year, till, a set fee of 30,000 a year till 2043?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Well, the property just sold for $37 million, so I don't know what the assessed value is, but that's a pretty significant assessed value for 14, 16 acres. I think it's the highest per
Yes,
cost
sir.
I've ever seen.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
From the ABC, they'll continue to get.
Yes, sir. It's still
Wherever.
it's still the Wrightsville Beach
got it.
ABC store, and still goes to them. Yes, sir, unfortunately.
I want to ask a question which relates to the competitive bidding, for organizations. And I know that this is the end of the 2-year cycle, correct? And that's on page 79. I have no problem with what was awarded. My question is, I remember when we did this a couple years ago, we had talked about agencies that maybe failed the process. And I was just wondering, were there any new agencies that failed the process this year?
I don't know that we've gotten full reports. This is the first full year of funding, as I recall, for both programs, and I don't know that we've gotten year-end results from them as yet.
Okay, because one of the things I was interested in was if there were programs that failed, what could we do to assist them, to help them to get on their feet? And it may not be us, but some other organizations. Thank you. I'm good.
Go ahead, Luke.
All right, last one. Page 113 is this is just Crowley educational for me, but is the Getting Home program, is that held within the Uniform Patrol Division, or is that Special Operations Division? And then we're still fully funding that program, correct?
Chief, I believe that's Uniform Patrol, is it not? Okay. See, that's the reason you asked the question. Thank you, Chief.
Morning.
Morning.
Right now, it's in the office of the chief assigned to the Community Engagement Unit.
Okay, all right, and it has full funding.
It has full funding, and we're fully staffed with 4 officers as of February.
We need more.
Yeah, well, we'll take more. Give it to us.
Because it's working. I'm hearing great stuff in the community about it, and it's working. And so I think we need to look at leaning into it, if not this year, then next. But.
Yes, our plans are hopefully around August, September, we can get DSS and our officers in here to give you an update on what they're doing.
Great. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Remember that this is ARPA funding.
Yeah, but we did put some funding in from the opioid settlement to keep it going after 2025.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's going to keep rolling.
Yes, sir.
All right, Chief Williams, while I have you there, sir, tell us how we're standing with employment with police officers.
Right now, on paper, we are in single digits. We have about 7 to 8 vacancies, but the reality is we have about 40 people in different stages of training. We have somewhere around 20 to 22 officers that are set to come out of field training in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We have 10 that will graduate the academy on June 19th. And we have another dozen or so that we will be sending to the next summer academy.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, could you give me the number again real quick on the paving streets?
We previously had allocated $6 million on an annual basis. We've added $2 million to that this year.
So we're total of 8 million, Dave?
Yes.
So it's 8 million?
I just drove down Market Street getting here this morning without my fillings getting rattled out. DOT is, I don't even know when they did, must be doing it in the middle of the night.
Yes, sir, I believe they are doing evening paving.
So last year we had, can you refresh my memory on last year, what did we spend on resurfacing? Do you remember?
What did we spend last year on resurfacing?
It was
$6 million.
It was 6 million last year, so
Yes,
we've upped it. So we've upped it another 2 million for this
Yes,
year.
sir, we've
we're-
upped it another $2 million this year.
So
Yes,
we're at
sir.
8 million, and I know that Dave had been waiting for a piece of equipment that I think has already come in, and you're already working on that. But we're also subcontracting some of that work out to some private entity. Okay, very good.
I know it was in there, but that additional 2 million equated to some mileage, did it not?
Come on, Dave.
It's give or take about 10 lane miles.
And the next big section that you folks are looking at, these are just all over?
We have a list that we're working with. I can bring it up here and tell
Could you just real
Sure.
quick? Curious.
And while you're pulling that list, there are a number of people who just patted me on the back for 6th Street getting tarred, and I took all the credit. So I just want you to know.
You deserve the credit, and that
All the
was
credit.
that one
All
was
the credit.
that was a bad block.
Took it all.
Specifically, we looked at the additional $2 million to try and give the contractor a bit of an advantage by doing longer stretches. So we looked at collector type streets, and we looked at collectors that had a PCI of less than 70, because that's our trigger. We want a collector of less than 70. That's our trigger to get it resurfaced. So the locations that we've come up with, in addition to that, we also looked at the census tract areas that had lower overall average PCI within that census tract area. So the streets that we have on this list include Forest Hills from Market to Wayne, Colonial from Market all the way to Wrightsville, McCray from Chestnut to Red Cross, South 10th. There's a couple of sections that would, on either side of the section in front of Williston Williston Middle School. That was resurfaced a couple of years ago, so we're trying to kind of bookend that. East Lake Shore, from Greenfield to Cypress. This gets us about halfway around the lake. Lake Branch Drive from Greenfield to Lakeshore, and then also Robin Hood from Lakeshore up to South 17th Street. That totals right around 10 miles.
Can we get a copy of that, you think?
Sure, absolutely.
Hey, Dave, there's that one section, it's over there by Portia Hines Park. I don't know if you had an opportunity to take a look at that. I think it was at the intersection of 10th or, that's a pretty significant, it looks like this maybe even collapsing a little bit in that intersection. It's pretty tough in that intersection. When you get right over Rankin Terrace and you're coming down that hill toward downtown. Have y'all looked at that? I know I asked about that particular one.
Yes, sir. We had planned on one block, and based on your comments, we've gone back out there and look at it, and we're going to add at least one additional block, if not two, to that section of, I guess is it Rankin at that
Right,
location?
right there at Rankin, yeah. Okay. All right, and then on the brick streets, are we pretty much, right at this point in time, are we still uncovering, or are we pretty much, is that it? Or where are we with that brick, the brick street stuff?
So we just approved a contract with Gens LLC for an on-call, annual needs contract for their work. They're going to be starting, excuse me, on the block directly in front of Solomon Towers,
Yeah.
Castle Street between Front and going down towards the boat ramp.
That's a pretty bad street right there, actually. I was down there yesterday. My God. That's the one. Thank you for reminding me.
It may be the worst.
It is the worst, no doubt.
In addition to that block, they're going to be doing the block of South Front from that same intersection, from that Castle Street intersection, headed south.
Heading toward the Hess terminal, heading toward Satellite?
Yes,
that
sir.
area?
It's brick underneath the street right there, and as you're coming north on Front Street, coming into downtown, that particular block is on our protected map.
Really?
Yes, sir.
All the way to the on-ramp? Where
No,
Poochie's-
it's just pretty much directly in front of the commercial business that's right there.
Over there with the little, where they sell the
restaurant equipment.
The restaurant equipment company, okay.
Yes, sir.
So
So
it goes to that section?
Yeah, it's just that one block.
Okay.
So those are the two blocks that we have projected with the contract that we have for them right now. With the funding that we get within this upcoming budget that you're discussing, we have two other blocks, and those escape me right off the top of my head, but I think it's another block of South 13th that we're looking at, and also Red Cross between 2nd and 3rd.
Gotcha, that's needed, absolutely. Okay, good.
Those, I'm not sure both of those other blocks would be covered with the budget that we're getting, but we could at least get one of those two blocks.
It's important. Okay, very good.
And the balance of Chestnut Street coming into town, I know we paved the drive portion on a section of Chestnut, and then after you get off that, it goes back to being like a moonscape.
Oh, yeah, so we have projected both Chestnut and Grace for next calendar year. It's probably going to be late in the calendar year. We've worked with the utility authority. They're going to do some less significant rehab work on water valves and sewer manholes. And once they get that done, we're looking at complete resurfacing from 3rd all the way out to 16th Street.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave.
And that's not just Chestnut, that's also Grace.
Thank you very much. I know they'll be glad to see that.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Dave. This question is for Tony and Meredith primarily, but it just seems in the last couple of months, we've been getting a lot of inquiries about the floating or the docks down on the river. And I understand we own a portion of them. The rest of them are privately owned, but there's a perception that we own I know at the foot of Market, I think we do own those or maintain those, I think. But the ones that are going further south, whether it be in front of the Brooks Building, where Carl Marshburn's got his boat going all the way up toward the Pilot House, those docks there, are they privately owned?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So they are privately owned. So I don't know why people keep coming to us, asking us to repair them or fix them, or we have something to do with them. Could you explain what that it's all about in respect to those docks and the accessibility to those docks, and what can they put out there or not put out there? And who maintains them?
Yes, sir. So I think that people are calling us because originally 20 years ago, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the city first started the Riverwalk project, we came through those areas and did work in those areas to build the Riverwalk, and we obtained CAMA permits to do that. In the process, in return for the access across the back of those properties for the Riverwalk, we enhanced some of those docks, and so the CAMA permits that we got as we went along the Riverwalk included us enhancing docks or building new docks for those property owners as we came across the back of their properties. And so the original CAMA permits were in the name of the city for the purpose of the Riverwalk project. Those permits have expired, and so any work that needs to be done on them now is by those homeowners. We never owned the property. We just got the CAMA permits to be allowed to do the work on the property. And some of those CAMA permits specifically listed what the docks were to be used for. Some of them named transient only. Some of them included riverboat tours and this, that, and the other. And so whatever was listed on those CAMA permits when they expired is what is in place today. And so if those homeowners or HOAs want to do anything different or do any different building on those areas now, they have to go back to CAMA and get additional permits to do that. But the city does not maintain the docks. We maintain the Riverwalk.
Well, I guess that's where one of the issues is coming in, is the condition of those docks looks pretty horrendous. Some of them look really bad. Their planks missing, they're old, they're dilapidated. Are they the responsibility of a homeowners association or an individual property owner? And do we have any mechanism to force any kind of improvement if they're going to keep the docks there? Because it looks pretty bad. And in fact, we're getting comments from people, tourists, people that are, that are here to the CVB and to others about the condition of those docks, thinking that it's the city's maintenance issue, but it's not. So is there any way to force any kind of improvement or to at least clean it up somewhat?
So some of them are owned by HOAs, some of them are owned by individual property owners. We don't, unless we go and specifically look, we don't have any way to know, but I do know that some of them are owned by an HOA. Sometimes the HOA has sold them off to individual property owners. If we get those complaints, we could probably take a look at them. I'm not certain the extent. I'd have to look and see, as far as enforcement goes, what we could do to, to reach out to them. But they would be covered by either the HOA or the property owner, not the city, as far as any cost of fixing them up.
Wouldn't it be code enforcement for safety?
I believe so. I believe that's probably where it would fall. I just have to look into that with the issues of being out over the water and all of that.
And so if somebody has a dock there that's privately owned and they allow, transient docking to take place there, one of the issues that we've had and one of the reasons that we kind of abandoned the program years ago was for safety and public safety. Would we be responsible as a city? I mean, the access point to take the gangplank down to the floating dock, are we responsible for that security as a city, or would it be a private ownership issue? Would they provide private security for those folks that are in those transient docks?
If they're issuing, transient docks, if they're allowing people to go on their docks in that way, then that would be their insurance and the property owners. If they want to provide security, they just want to have insurance, however they want to do it, but it would not be on the city. But we likely could, just like we would cite for other issues on somebody's property. If it's a safety issue, I believe we could do that, but I just have to
Do we
look
have
at
any
that.
documentation that we send to these homeowners associations? My concern has always been, and this happened a couple of times, where people have gone down there and untied the boats while people are sleeping in them. And the boat that's one of the reasons that we walked away from it years ago, because at least at the foot of Market Street was some of the transient docking that was going on there. People would walk down there and untie the rope, and the boat would float away with the people in it. And they'd wake up and, my God, they're almost hitting the Memorial Bridge. And I guess my question is, do we put notification to those private property owners to make certain that they understand, so we have something in documentation, so in the event that that does happen on private property, they don't turn around and try to sue the city to protect us?
No, sir, we don't have any way of notifying those private property owners, and we're not allowed to post anything on their property, on the private property. But we have no interest in ownership on any of those. So if somebody did try to sue us, that would, there's no ownership on the part of the city.
But there's no reason why we can't notify them and tell them what the mayor just said, you know, in the event.
Your security's yours.
I mean, we need to put them on notice.
Sure, well, we could do that. We just have not. We've not, you know, attempted to post anything and haven't been asked to do that. So if that's something that council would like us
Yes.
to look into.
And the reason that we were on the camera permit, it was as a benefit to the owners to expedite that permit coming from the city versus a litany of people.
Sure, and also, you know, in return for allowing us to go across the back of their property for the Riverwalk. Yes, sir.
And the docks that we do own, I mean, the dockage facilities, you lay that out for me, please?
Who's here from Community Services that can address this issue?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Sally Thigpen. I'm the Assistant Director of the Community Services Department. Our department does oversee the maintenance of the city docks. Unfortunately, I'm not prepared with my images and detailed information about each one of those. We can come back to you with that. But yes, we are responsible for the routine maintenance of those sites. We've made several investments over the years, including upgrading the fire suppression devices out there. We do have docks that are dedicated to police and fire. We have docks that we lease to the riverboats, and also one for the their water taxi over to the battleship.
Let me ask it a different way. I mean, we don't own the ones we were just discussing, but approximately where does the city ownership begin? Is it like to put a market up toward the north end, or? I'm just kind of curious.
That sounds accurate. I'd feel a lot more comfortable if I had a map that I could show you, so I could be more specific.
My recollection is that it's the foot of market to the Coast Guard berth, and then I don't believe we have any ownership from there northward, but that's my recollection. We need to wait on the map.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. The marina up north is private property, but it is within the city limits. We did check on that a couple weeks ago, and so there are taxes and whatever that are applicable to that whole marina. Even though it goes out, we have extended.
But we're not responsible for it.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. What are we responsible for? Okay, thank you.
Hold on, Sally. And this again may not, I mean, I guess you're probably the best contact. Do we have any, does the city, you know, Wrightsville Beach, Carolina Beach has a place where, you know, if you want to come have dinner, you can come tie up and go eat. Do we have any of those?
Absolutely. Currently, the program allows free day docking on all of our public docks.
Okay. So when you get a chance, maybe just shoot us a little diagram or something, let us know where those are. It'd be awesome.
Sure, be happy to. Thank you.
And the reason I'm bringing it up, as the waterfront, especially with the amphitheater and the Riverwalk and more development is taking place, especially up at River Lights, where they're going to be, I think, putting in some sort of a marina complex up that way. As that becomes more and more active, and we see more development on the west bank of the Cape Fear River in Brunswick County, we're starting to see more activity, recreational activity coming up this way, and now all of a sudden we're starting to hear more of where can I dock, where can I go, who owns what, how do you identify the private docks from the public docks, and so Tony, I just want to make certain that I know your staff hopefully will be on top of that, just to make certain that we can address those issues when they arise.
Sure, and we can go ahead and look and figure out who the owners are of those non-city owned docks along the waterway, and we can send them some notice that the city's not responsible for maintenance or security or insurance on those properties.
Good, very good. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Mr. Manager, I don't see any additional questions here. It's kind of early, but that's the way we wanted it. I think you guys have done a magnificent job on the budget and what you've been able to do, and holding the tax rate where it is. I commend all the city staff and departments and appreciate all the hard work here. This was not easy.
Thank you, sir.
It's, hopefully everything was going to work perfectly.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your time this morning. If you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or to Mary or to Laura.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
With that,
you.
we stand adjourned.